Okay, Year 5, this is it, the final chapter of Beetle Boy. Chapter 24, Back to Base Camp. Darkus dragged the ladder from the shed and leant it against the wall. His right arm and shoulder were tightly bandaged and hung in a sling. His shoulder hurt so badly if he jogged or jarred it that it made him suck air through his teeth, but he was determined to get over that wall. Right, I'm going up, he said to Baxter, stepping onto the ladder. Since the shooting, the rhinoceros beetle had taken to perching on Darkus's head or his other shoulder, but couldn't settle in either position, so he kept clambering between the two. Once upon the wall, Darkus gingerly slid down the other side, landing on a stack of drawers, and carefully picked his way down into Furniture Forest. As he passed the rat trap, Darkus shook his head. He couldn't believe it had only been a week since they'd found Uncle Max in there. It seemed much longer than that. Crawling slowly through the tunnels with Baxter flying before him, Darkus noticed that some of the beetles had taken up residence in the bedsteads and tables that made up the forest. He could see the punched holes of woodworm in the furniture. When they saw him, the Tok-Tokkies and the Deathwatch beetles hammered their abdomens and heads against the nearest hard surfaces as he passed by, like miniature woodpeckers, to show their appreciation for what he and Virginia and Bertolt had done for them. Darkus smiled. Despite the awkward and sometimes painful effort of crawling, it was good to be heading back to base camp victorious. He only had a blurred memory of what had happened after he was shot. He remembered being lifted onto a stretcher and the ambulance team fitting a drip into his arm, then the sound of sirens blaring. Uncle Max had been by his side, holding his hand the entire time. There were faces and cameras flashing, voices shouting. "Darkus! Darkus! How does it feel to be reunited with your father? Who shot you, Darkus?" The bullet had gone straight through his shoulder and remarkably done little damage, but he'd lost a lot of blood. He'd been in hospital for 5 days before the doctors agreed to discharge him into the care of Uncle Max. Dad hadn't fared as well. Darkus remembered the medical team lifting off Dad's jumper in the back of the ambulance and cutting away the stained shirt from his body. He remembered seeing hundreds of bleeding lesions and sores all over his father's chest. Dad was still in hospital now, being treated for an infection. Darkus wondered for the 100th time what the ant-like creatures in the cell were. They definitely weren't beetles. Novak had called them assassin bugs. He stopped. There it was, the black front door with the silver 73. He climbed to his feet. With his good right hand, he turned the handle and walked into base camp. "Darkus!" Virginia shouted, then whooped with joy. "Hello!" Bertolt's voice was breathless, his eyes shining. "We've been here every day after school. We didn't know if you'd come back," he gabbled. Newton was flicking and fizzing above his head. Darkus laughed, delighted to see them both, and came to sit with them on the couch. "Are you okay?" he asked, seeing Bertolt's bandaged arms. "What happened to you?" "Lucretia cut his legs, didn't you see?" Bertolt replied. "You were right. She's got claws and spikes like a beetle, and they're as sharp as knives. When I grabbed her legs, the spikes cut my arms." "The battle plan," Darkus looked at Virginia. "Did it work?" "Like a dream," Virginia nodded, her eyes sparkling. "The beetles were amazing and so brave. Marvin was with me the whole time." She reached up to where he sat on her hair bubble and tickled his red thorax. "I wish you could have seen Lucretia Cutter's men sliding around and screaming, covered in poo," she chuckled. "It was the funniest thing, and Bertolt's rockets were brilliant. When the firecrackers went off, Pickering thought he was being shot." Her voice tailed off as she looked at Darkus's shoulder. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "A bit," Darkus nodded. "I got really tired in the evenings, but being shot's not as bad as you think it's going to be." Virginia looked so impressed that Darkus blushed. "Baxter was brave too," Bertolt said, looking affectionately at the rhinoceros beetle as he settled on Darkus's good shoulder. "When Lucretia Cutter shot you, he went for the face." "Yeah," Virginia nodded. "I think he got her in the eye with his horn." "Everything happened so fast," Darkus marvelled. "I didn't see anything at all. When she pointed her stick, I knocked her over. Her glasses fell off and her eyes, they were bulging out of her head like black shiny marbles." Bertolt looked suddenly scared. "Darkus, they were like beetle eyes." "Compound eyes," Virginia nodded. "She's got compound eyes?" Darkus shook his head. "What is she?" "She's not human, that's for sure," Virginia said grimly. "Then her bodyguard jumped in and pulled her out of there, and they drove off." "She escaped?" Darkus couldn't believe what he was hearing. "After shooting me?" "The police went after her," Virginia said. "Is your uncle angry about what we did to the Emporium?" Bertolt asked nervously. "Is his flat okay?" Darkus laughed. "Is that why you didn't come to see me in hospital? In case he shouted at you?" "No," Bertolt looked flustered. "I wasn't allowed. Our parents were very angry with us for lying about where we were." Virginia nodded. "I'm grounded forever." "Well, how come you're here then?" Virginia snorted. "I'm not here now," she said. "I'm in the library, studying." Ooh, that on the page. Darkus laughed. Well, you don't need to worry. The flat's fine. Uncle Max had some men round to check. It's not going to fall down. Phew, said Bertolt. He told me that because it was only the middles of the floors that fell down and all the walls were left alone. The Emporium is condemned, but there was no damage to the buildings on either side. Really? Bertolt looked surprised. He said you should get a degree in engineering for not pulling down the entire street. That's nice. Bertolt pushed his glasses up his nose. Does this mean that you're going to go back to your old school now your dad's back? Not yet, Darkus shook his head. Dad's still in hospital, and when he does come out, he'll need looking after. So Uncle Max has said we can both stay here until he's back on his feet. Oh, that's wonderful news. Bertolt's face lit up, and Newton looped the loop and flashed his tail. There is some bad news, though, Virginia said. What? Darkus asked. Bertolt bit his lip. They didn't catch Lucretia Cutter. What? Darkus stood up. She escaped, Virginia said, and Humphrey and Pickering have been charged by the police with attempted murder for shooting you. But that's crazy. They didn't shoot me. Lucretia Cutter did. I know, Bertolt agreed. She's still out there somewhere, Darkus asked. Virginia nodded. But the beetles are safe, she reminded him. Beetle Mountain is hidden in the sewer, and Pickering and Humphrey are in prison, so Furniture Forest is ours. Do you think she'll come back? Bertolt asked. Darkus sat back down and sighed. I don't know. She's up to something, and whatever it is, it's dark. I can see it in my dad's face. He looked up at the light-speckled tarpaulin ceiling of base camp. But it doesn't matter what she comes at us with, he said, turning from Virginia to Bertolt. We've got the beetles. His hand went up to Baxter on his shoulder. Don't forget your good friends, Virginia added with a grin. Yes, Bertolt nodded. And with a bit of grit and determination, Darkus smiled. We're unbeatable. And that's it. That is the end of Beetle Boy. But if you do want to read on, there's a second and a third book. The second book is called Beetle Queen and is all about Lucretia Cutter and what she gets up to next. If you do read it, let me know, because I'd be really interested to see where it goes. In fact, I think I might order it myself and read it too. Now, tomorrow we are going to be starting our third book, and this one is all about, well, we've got a lovely headmistress, haven't we? Mrs. Wokes is really nice and very kind. But what if you had a head that wasn't very nice and in actual fact was trying to control your mind? Well, that's where we're going next. We're going to be reading The Demon Headmaster, which is a book I loved when I was younger as well, and finding out all about what happens with this demon headmaster and what he is up to. Okay, guys, so I'll see you for a new book tomorrow. Bye.